Our next topic is setting up and using strategies. So we want to start by discussing what strategies are in the collections application. Strategies are manual or automated activities, things that a collector needs to do. So therefore we use the terminology task, strategy task. You can think of them as work items, things that need to be completed either by a collector or that the application will perform automatically. Now these tasks are linked together, and of course there is a sequence, so they are organized in an order in which they are to be executed. So let's think about some of these tasks, and so that we can give you some examples. So think of this as a collection activity again, and the idea here is that there are outstanding transactions, that there is a delinquency scenario for a customer. So examples of these tasks include calling the customer, to collect. Can be a friendly phone call, can be a more assertive phone call, asking the customer to please make the payment. Can be something like sending a zoning letter via fax or email. Now that particular task, that particular example of a task, can be something that's automated that the collections application can do. Once you execute once you implement and execute these strategies feature that we are talking about here. An example of another task can be an escalation to a supervisor. Now, if a task is escalated, then the manager will receive an escalation notification automatically, and the task will remain assigned to the collector. So there's a notification there again that goes to the manager of that collector to escalate that specific collection activity. Now, when I think of strategies, I think of automation in the collections application. Of course, when your strategies include the zoning feature, so you can send zoning letters, and in addition to that, you can assign workload to collectors and obviously execute automated activities. So a lot of it has to do with automation in order to increase efficiencies in the collections process. Now, how do strategies support collection activities? How are they helpful to a collector? How are they helpful to your organization? Well, number one, we would like to highlight here that strategies are associated to customer accounts or bill-to sites. This is what we refer to as the business level. Okay, business level indicates at which level your organization performs at. And that can be at the customer level, that can be at the customer account level, or even more granular at the customer account site level. Okay, it depends on what the requirements are for your organization. So you can define strategies so that you can automate some of the collections work, like sending a zoning letter, or even assign to-dos to collector at these three different levels that I have highlighted here. Of course, they are can be defined to meet business requirements. That's the whole idea, that there might be certain things that you do for certain customers, and you take other approaches for other customers. So in that regard, you can have you can define the configurations for the strategies features different ways to accommodate business requirements. Now, of course, when we think about strategies in the collections application, we want to think about scoring, the use of scoring rules. What does that mean? We are going to evaluate, we're going to assess the collection status of a customer. Okay, and based on that collection status, based on that collections condition, we are going to assign a score to the customer. Now, as we will see later, normally when you see low scores, then that means that the collections condition of the customer is not so good. And when you see higher scores, then that means that the customer is not doing that bad. If we are scoring customers, if we are assigning a score to them to indicate the level of collectability, right, the degree or even the probability of collectability, then that means we are going to need data points. We are going to have to measure things like amount overdue, percent of the balance that's overdue, number of transactions that are delinquent, etc., etc. So this process of scoring a customer involves using data points, using data that's stored, of course, in the receivables module, in the collections module. Now, as I had said earlier, strategies do include dunning, but they do provide an alternative to dunning. This feature, strategies, is not limited only to sending dunning letters. There's automation, as I highlighted, and there is also the piece of the strategies feature that allows you to assign work items to collectors. So in that respect, we think that it does provide an alternative to only using the dunning feature. The strategies involves dunning plus more. The focus of this feature is to look at delinquent transactions, and by that we mean transactions that are overdue. Now, when we're looking at transactions that are overdue, of course, we are going to need an aging method. An aging method consists of a number of buckets of time to measure how old a customer balance is. So in that aging method, you're going to have buckets, a bucket that will measure balances that are 1 to 30 days old, another bucket that will measure balances that are 31 to 60 days old, etc., etc. Okay, so that's going to be an important piece of using the strategies feature, and to be able to assess transactions and determine whether or not they are delinquent. Now, of course, this is something that's done automatically by running a process. Now, the strategies feature, of course, can be used with simple, very simple, collection activities or more complex collection activities. So it's a very flexible feature, and the idea here is to comply with business requirements so that you can expedite the collection process and collect those overdue payments as soon as possible. Now let's talk about the configurations. The first thing I want to highlight here is the collections method. So when you start gathering requirements for your organization, you are going to determine what is the correct collection method for a given business unit or a group of business units. As you can see here in the picture, when you go in and set the collection method, you are going to be pointing to a reference data set. The reference data set is then connected to the business unit. Now, what is the collections method? There are two choices here. You can either go with strategies, which is the feature that we've been talking about, or with dunning plan. Okay, dunning plan means that you are only going to use the dunning feature in collections. If you decide to go with strategies, you are using the dunning feature plus more, automation, assigning workload, etc., etc. So let's take a look at this configuration in the Functional Setup Manager. I'm going to navigate to the Functional Setup Manager and look for this implementation task, Manage Collections Methods, so that we can take a look. I'm going to go to the application now. So from the home page, I'm going to take a shortcut and go to Settings and Actions in the top right, and then select Setup Maintenance. Then I'm going to pick Financials as the offering. Collections as a functional area. And then I'm going to look for that task. Okay, there we go, Manage Collections Methods. And of course, here we can see that there are two collections method sets. In other words, reference data sets that of course are going to be mapped to the business units. That's how the business units are going to see these configurations. They can be configurations that are shared or business unit specific. So I'm going to click on Add here. Of course, you would pick the reference data set here, the method, notice the options, dunning plan versus strategies, a default collector and grace period days here. So that's going to be important as you assess the collection status of a customer. You might use grace days to be flexible and just allow them a few more days to make that payment. But the one thing I want to repeat once again is the fact that if you pick the collections method strategies, that will include the donning feature. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click cancel here and return to the PowerPoint. Now, of course, besides selecting the collections method for your business unit or group of business units, there are other important setups that that you need to understand, and they include scoring data points. As I highlighted earlier, to be able to assign a score to a customer, and again, that score means it's going to give you an idea of how that customer is doing from a collections perspective. You need to use data, right? You need to use data points. And so here are some of the examples that we are providing. Delinquencies count, that just means number of transactions that are delinquent or overdue, delinquent amount, etc. There are, of course, many more data points, and when I get to the demo, we are going to explore some of those, and we'll give you the navigation to see the delivered data points. The idea, again, to determine the collection condition of a customer, to assess how that customer is doing from a collections perspective. Then we have scoring formulas. Scoring formulas use data points to calculate scores for customers. Higher scores indicate a better chance of collectability. So if you are using the predefined data points and the predefined scoring formulas, that is what you are going to see. When a score is high, it just means that you have a good chance of collecting from that customer. And by the way, the range falls between 1 and 100. So of course, if I'm thinking about that range, a score of 80 is going to be better than a score of 45, right? Now, there's the strategy tasks. These are the actual collection activities that are either manual or automated. So things like phone calls or sending down letters. Now, when defining these tasks, you can specify a wait time between one task and another, because of course you are going to be dealing with multiple tasks that are going to be executed in a certain sequence. So there's the option in there to specify wait time. There's the option there to make the task optional, and also there's an option out there to escalate the task, and that means that the escalation is going to go to the manager of that collector. So those are some of the things in there that are going to be important from the perspective of defining strategy tasks or work items. Of course, those tasks are going to be then collected or assigned to a strategy task group. Okay, in the strategy task group, you are going to specify what the activity will be based on the score. So this is going to tie the collection scores to relevant tasks. A high score might just require a very nice conversation with the customer, whereas if the score is low, the phone call might not be as friendly. It's going to be more of an assertive phone call. So that is the setup that allows you to tie the scores to those tasks that are going to be either manual or automated. Then we have the collections scoring and the strategy assignment, and that just means that at some point the collections application will need to assign these scoring formulas to customers, and this is something that can be done automatically by running a process. We are going to talk about that in more detail later on. So the idea with this collection scoring and strategy assignment is to facilitate, make it easy, this assignment of scoring formulas and strategy groups to customers. And of course, this is going to be done at different business levels. Can be at the customer level, can be at the account level, can be at the site level, depending on how your organization performs collections. There is an option to go to the collections work area and make a manual assignment of a strategy to a customer, but again, we run a process that will automatically take care of this step, and we'll talk about that coming up. Now, a couple more things to mention here. When you run, and the name of the process is very similar to what you see here, the collection scoring and strategy assignment process. That is the name of the process. When you run this process, the tasks are going to be assigned a number of statuses. Okay, for example, open, that might be a status that's assigned to a task, and that just means that the work is in progress. The status could be closed because the task no longer needs to be performed, maybe because the customer had paid the actual delinquent transaction in full. It could be complete because the collector completed the task and it was a manual task. So tasks have statuses. That's important to know. So I'm going to go to the next slide. Now here you see a list of processes that are going to be required, right? Once you set up your strategies in order to evaluate the condition of that customer and score the customer, and then of course assign workload to collectors and send only letters and execute those automated tasks, you have to run these processes that are highlighted here. And they go in the sequence that you see here, in this sequence that's depicted in the slide. So these are important to score customers, to create manual tasks, and execute automatic tasks. So the first one is the refresh receivables transactions for customer account summaries. Then you turn around and run the collections delinquency management process. Okay, that is the process going to look at the transactions of a customer and determine whether they are overdue. Then you run the collection scoring and strategy assignment process, and that is the process again that's going to assign strategies to customers based on configurations. Okay. Then of course we want to make sure we run the update collections summary data. That's going to be an important process that will ensure that the data the collectors see in the collections work area is accurate. Now, of course, you might wonder, what are the, what is the technology involved in the automation of these collections work? What happens in the background when you're running these processes? So notifications are sent to the designated person, and the technology being used there is the service-oriented architecture technology. In terms of sending emails, sending a dulling letter via email, or faxing a dulling letter to a customer, that might be an automated task. The technology involved in that would be Oracle Business Intelligence Publisher. Now, of course, there's an important consideration that we want to highlight here. There are certain processes, specifically the delinquency management process, the collection scoring process, as well as the update collection summary data, that include a business unit parameters. So if you want users to run these processes for multiple business units, they must be authorized to do so. So you'll have to authorize that for the users, that data access to those relevant business units, so that then the users can run these processes, for 3, 4, 5 business units, or just for the one business unit, whatever is necessary. So that's an important piece here, a security consideration. Now here, we want to demo what we have discussed. So I'm going to follow a number of steps here. I'm going to review a sample scoring data point and a scoring formula. Then I'm going to review a sample strategy task. Once I do that, then I'm going to move on and review a strategy group. That will be what will allow me to tie that task, that thing that needs to be done, to a score. Then I'm going to go to a configuration that allows me to specify default assignments for specific strategy groups. And of course, that will involve also the scoring formulas. When I run that process that we highlighted earlier, the scoring and strategy assignment process is going to look at this configuration. Okay, it's going to look at what should be the strategy assignment group that needs to be executed, and what should be the scoring formula that needs to be executed. And in terms of the strategy group, what we are doing there is making sure that we are assigning that to a customer, right? We want to make sure that we assign that to a customer, and of course that will depend on business requirements. We might have different strategy groups for different customers. Then I'm going to run these processes in the sequence indicated and review a sample customer and the newly assigned strategies in the collections work area. So what we'll do here is start by looking at a sample scoring data point. So I'm going to go to the application, and so I'll backtrack to the home page so that you can see the full navigation here to the functional setup manager. I'm going to go to the Settings and Actions menu, select Setup Maintenance, and then from here I'm going to pick Financials, go down to Collections, and in the collections, for this collections functional area, I'm looking for Manage Collections Scoring Data Points. Okay. Now, of course, there are a lot of different data points in here, but I'm going to use as an example the account delinquency rate, and there are multiple here. These are delivered. As you can see all the way to the right, there is a column. The predefined column indicates if the data point is predefined. So we have the account delinquency rate for 1 to 30 days, 31 to 60 days, 91, and then 91 days or more. So I'm going to look at this one. And what do we mean by account delinquency rate? We mean account percent overdue. How much of the balance is overdue and falls within the bucket of 1 to 30 days. That's what this means. So the customer might have a $15,000 balance that's overdue, but how much is it falls in this time bucket? Okay, that's what this account delinquency rate means. Okay, and so here I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. Okay, and now I'm going to go to the next implementation task, and that will be this task by the name of Manage Collections Scoring. Now here I'm going to look at the first one at the top of the list, and of course we can also see that this is predefined. You can create your own scoring formulas, but I'm going to look at this predefined scoring formula. So I'm going to click on this one. And let's see here. So of course, if it is a scoring formula, it's using data points, and we can see the data points towards the middle of the page. Now notice here that the score goes from 1 to 100. That will be the range. If the score is high, that indicates that you have a situation where most likely you are able to collect. If the score is low, then that means that you are probably going to run into problems collecting the money because maybe the balances are really, really old. So high scores are good from a collectability perspective, and then low scores are not so good. Now here you see the data points that I described before: 91 or more days, 61 to 90 days, 31 to 60. So in an ideal situation, you might want to have the bulk of that customer balance in 1 to 30 days. That means that the balances are not so old. Okay, but there are situations where the balance may be old. To each data point, there is a weight assigned to it. And again, all of this is going to be used to calculate the score. Now notice here that balances 91 days or older are more important than balances that are 1 to 30 days old, right? Because the balances are getting older and older. So you want to make sure that you concentrate on interacting with that customer that has those old balances so that you can collect. Then if you look for the data point at the bottom, you see the ranges to calculate the score. If the range of the balance falls between 0 and 1%, then you're going to give, the collections application is going to assign a score of 100. If the balance falls between 1.01% and 10%, then the application is going to assign a score of 50. And again, we're only looking at this particular data point at the top 91 days or older. The same ranges are going to apply for the remaining data points for 61 to 90 and even 1 to 30 days, as you can see here, right? You see these ranges here. Depending on the percent of the account that's overdue, then it's going to assign a score. Okay? All right, so that's the scoring formula. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel here. And cancel again. And we want to take a look at the sample strategy tasks. These are the things that can be automated or that you want a collector to do. Okay, if you want the collector to perform the task, to complete it, then it's going to be a manual task. If it's automated, then the collections application will do it. So here I have two sample tasks that I have created. There's the friendly phone call, and then of course you can see that the type is manual. So I'm going to go ahead and edit so we can see. The other option would be automatic, a task that you want the collections applications to perform. It is a phone call, can be something like a review or a personal visit that you want the collector to do. And then there are options here, as we mentioned, to wait until the task is executed, and then to have a waiting time after the task is executed, because of course there might be something that comes after that friendly phone call, and you might want to wait before the next task is performed by the collector. Then there are options here to make the task optional and options for escalation. Okay, so that's an example of a task. I have created these two that we see in the background, the friendly phone call and the tough phone call. And by that, I mean a phone call that's going to be more assertive because maybe the customer has been advised that they have a balance due and they haven't, make the payment, or maybe the balances are getting older and older and we haven't received payment. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel and go to the next configuration, which will be the strategy group. Okay, here I am. So I'm looking for specific implementation task here. Manage collection strategies. And so here I have created this strategy group, and I have assigned the level of account. We have three levels: customer account site. Okay, so here I'm going to click on this particular strategy group, and so that we can take a look. Now here we give it a name. That's the first thing you have to do. Assign a name to the strategy group. There are options to create strategies for pre-delinquency, meaning that you are anticipating that maybe large transactions may become overdue, but that's not what we're doing here. We are working with delinquent strategies. And then you can see the level here, the three options: customer, account, and site. So I have assigned the strategy level of account. There's a start date. You can potentially end date strategy groups. And then you see here in the strategies section the method name. Now I have used this naming convention. There's a hard method and an easy method. For the hard method, what does that mean? If the score is between 0 and 49, I'm going to assign this task to the collector, and of course that means that it's going to be a very assertive phone call, therefore the name, a tough phone call. So it's gonna, my collector is gonna call the customer and demand a payment. So it's not gonna be a reminder, it's gonna be a demand for payment. If the score falls between 50 and 100, then I'm calling that particular method easy. So what do I want the collector to do? I want the collector to call the customer and be friendly and just say that, listen, we have a number of transactions, can be one, can be multiple. that are overdue, and this is just a friendly reminder to please make a payment. So as you can see here, this setup, the strategy group, allows you to tie the scores to the tasks that need to be done. And those tasks can be manual or can be automated or automatic. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. Cancel again. Now I want to show you the strategy assignments. Of course, there is a process that will assign the strategy to customers. But what that process does is it will look at this configuration that I'm about to show you. So I'm going to go to Manage Collection, Scoring, and Strategy Assignments. That's the name of the implementation task. Now the process itself has a similar name. The name of the process you run to assign, to make these assignments to customers, the strategy assignments to customers, is called Collection, Scoring, and Strategy Assignment. So very similar here to the name of the task. Now what is this implementation task for? The idea here is that you can make default assignments. Okay, so notice here the three business levels: customer, account, and site. Okay, and then you specify the scoring formula. And of course the scoring formula is connected to data points. Based on that scoring formula in the data points, collections is going to assess the condition of a customer, the overdue condition of that customer, and calculate a score. But then after it calculates the score, then of course you want to generate tasks, things that you want to assign to the collector and things that are going to be performed automatically. So therefore you see here that there is a delinquent strategy group assignment. Now here we want to look in the middle because we want to use the scoring formula, account scoring, and the strategy group 77 underscore strategy group. These are the two configurations that we reviewed a moment ago. Okay. There are additional options here to assign strategies by segment. What are some of those segments? Business unit. If customers belong to a certain profile class, then maybe you want to use a certain strategy. So that is functionality that is available. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. And what we want to do next, if we return to the slides for a moment, we have gone through steps 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm ready to run processes to calculate those scores and generate strategy tasks. Before I do that, however, I would like to take a look at the customer that I want to use as a sample customer. So I'm going to go back to the application, and now I'm logged in as a collector. So I'm going to go to collections. And I'm going to look for this customer. Okay, and so here, if I go to the profile tab, we can see that this is the Yellowbird Corporation and it is in delinquent status. If I go to this sub-tab, strategies, we can see that there are no strategy method assigned and that there are no tasks assigned to this customer. So there's nothing from a strategy perspective populated for this customer. Okay, so now that we've done that, we want to go and run those processes. So I'm going to click on done, and I'm going to go back to my super user instance here. I'm kind of logged in two different browsers, and in this particular browser I'm logged in as a super user. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to tools, schedule processes, and I'm going to click on schedule new process. Now the first process that we want to run here, if we remember that sequence, is the refresh receivables transactions for accounts for customer account summaries. A long name, but we can use the wildcard here. Okay, so there we go. Refresh receivable transactions for customer account summary. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this process now. And I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. And basically I'm going to refresh the job until I see the status succeeded. Here I can see that the process has run successfully. So I'm going to go to the next job, the next process. And let's see here, we're looking for collections delinquency. Okay, there we go. Now this job here will determine the delinquency status of transactions for a specific business unit. Can be more than one, because it's not going to be mandatory. If I don't specify the business unit and I have access to multiple business units, then it'll run them for those business units. Now here I'm going to pick US1 and hit submit. So again, I'm going to repeat what I did before, which is to refresh until I see the status succeeded. Let's refresh and see what's going on. And this process has also completed, so I'm going to schedule the next one in the sequence. So we're looking for the collection scoring and strategy assignments process. Now this process is going to look at that configuration in the functional setup manager to see what are the default assignments, and it's going to also look at potentially at assignments made at using segments such as business unit and customer profile class, if those exist. So here we go. So I'm going to select that one. Now this process will calculate score and assign strategy. So there are two things it will do, as we can see here. And it, of course, is going to look at the setup, at the strategy assignment setup. So here we can see that there's the business unit parameter. I'm going to run it for business unit US1 and hit submit. Okay, so I'm going to continue refreshing until I see a status of success. Now here I see the status succeeded for the collection scoring and strategy assignment process. Now this process is also going to launch, it's going to trigger the donning process, because of course the donning feature is part of the strategy's functionality. Now I have one more process to run, and that will be the update collection summary data. So this is going to update the delinquent customer list and refresh agent information. Of course, this is going to impact what collectors see in the collectors work area, in the collections work area. So here we have business unit US1. You could potentially populate specific customers here if needed, but I'm going to run it for all customers. So I'm going to monitor until I see this process with the status of success. Now here I can see that the process ran successfully, and it also launched child processes or sub-processes, and they all completed successfully. So what I'm going to do at this point is take a look at that customer, that sample customer that I'm using in my test case. So I'm going to go back to the collections work area. Now here I'm logged in as a collector, and so what I'll do is I'm going to click on the collections icon from the home page, and I can see here the Yellowbird Corporation. Now what I'll do is I'm going to click on the link, and I'm going to go to Profile, the Profile tab, and then look at the Strategies sub-tab. And here we can see that a strategy has been assigned, and based on the setup, and of course based on running the the process that we run to score customers and assign strategies. And there is a task also assigned to the collector Jim Jones. Okay, this friendly phone call. The score basically was in the range where the strategy was the easiest strategy. So we want the collector to make a friendly phone call, and of course the status is open for this particular work item. So I'm going to click on done. And we saw not only the configuration, but also running the process and how the strategy task is generated. So now I'm going to return to the PowerPoint. Basically at this point we've gone through through the different steps to demonstrate this feature. We review the scoring data points, scoring formulas. We review the strategy task and how those are connected to to scores in the strategy group setup. We reviewed the strategy assignment that allows you to indicate what are the default assignments for the different business level, for the customer level, the customer account level, and the customer account site level. Okay, and of course, in that particular configuration, we saw that we can indicate that for different levels, we want a certain formula to be used and a certain strategy group. Then we run processes, to calculate scores for customers, and based on their collections condition, and generate strategy tasks. Again, some of those can be manual, some of those can be things that the collections application perform on its own because they're automatic. Then we went to the collections work area and took a look at the customer and saw how a strategy task was assigned to the collector in question. So we'll take a break now and then we'll continue with our next topic.